Jake Muller was born in 1992 to Albert Wesker and an unknown woman who immigrated to the United States alone in her early 20s. It's been theorized that Wesker pursued a romantic relationship during his time with Umbrella. However, it seems that this relationship did not last long, and it appears that this unknown woman may have ended the relationship and moved to the foreign country of Edonia without telling Wesker that she was pregnant with his child. From an early age, Jake had to support his chronologically ill mother for many years. Jake soon found work as a mercenary in order to support his mother, selling his services to the insurgents fighting against the government. Unfortunately, despite his best efforts, Miss Muller passed away not long after he became a soldier for fortune. On December 24, 2012, Jake would encounter the governmental agent Sherry Birkin, who asked for his help, stating that his body carried antibodies that could be used to create a cure against the newly designed C virus. Jake agreed, but only for the sum of $50 million. However, little did Jake and Sherry know that Neo Umbrella had sent their newest experiment, dubbed the Ustanak, after Jake to capture him for the similar purposes. Despite Jake and Sherry's best attempts, the Ustanak would succeed in capturing Jake, and Jake and Sherry would be helped for 6 months by Neo Umbrella, where Jake would learn about his father, Albert Wesker. Jake and Sherry would escape the facility, only to find themselves in secret Neo Umbrella's facility, and it is here that the two would encounter the Ustanak for the final time. Jake managed to defeat the Ustanak in hand-to-hand combat, and with Sherry's help, he was able to shoot the Ustanak right through the heart, putting it down once and for all. The last we see of Jake seems to be somewhere in the Middle East, where he has made a deal with a young boy to kill all the BOWs in exchange for an apple. Jack Krauser was born in 1976 and over the course of his life would show a profound interest in being a soldier. He was an experienced U.S. Army soldier and mercenary and led many successful operations and was an overall first-class soldier who took pride in his capabilities. Krauser's extensive military service and wealth of experience led him to become a Special Force member of the United States SOLCOM unit. In 2002, Krauser received an order to participate in a mission to South America to investigate a link between the Umbrella Corporation and the drug lord Javier Hidalgo. During the mission, Krauser would be partnered with an American government agent named Leon S. Kennedy. Upon reaching their rendezvous point in a local village, Krauser encountered BOWs for the first time. However, he remained fearless and demanded Leon to share everything he knew about them, and it was during this conversation that Krauser would first learn about Albert Wesker. During the mission's conclusion, Krauser would be injured in his left arm and due to his injuries was forced to retire. During his retirement, Krauser began to admire the use of biological weapons, having seen firsthand the power that they wielded and how they exceeded that of any normal human. He developed an ambition to acquire the power of BOWs for himself and in secret, so Krauser faked his own death, and it was shortly after this event that he would first encounter Albert Wesker himself. In 2004, Krauser would be ordered by Wesker to infiltrate the Las Luminadas cult in Europe and recover a sample of the dormant species Las Plagas. In order to gain the trust of the cult's leader, Lord Sadler, Krauser kidnapped the president's daughter, Ashley Graham. After gaining access to the inner circle of the cult, Krauser took a sample of the Plagas for himself and injected himself, now gaining the superhuman abilities that he had sought so long for. After this, Wesker would send Ada Wong in order to retrieve another sample of Las Plagas, and it was during this time that Krauser would encounter his old partner, Leon S. Kennedy. Ordered to kill Leon by both Wesker and Sadler, Krauser would engage Leon in combat but would be defeated. Despite his injuries, Krauser would then decide to go after Ada Wong and would be killed by her shortly after. Following the incident, Krauser's corpse was recovered by Wesker, and the dead Plagas specimen within his body was successfully cloned and aided in the development of Wesker's plans with the Tri-Cell organization. Well, what's up again there guys, Brian here at 3TR, and welcome to my next 3TR Resident Evil vs. Series matchup, and we got ourselves a good old-fashioned mercenary showdown. Now, since neither Jake Muller or Jack Krauser could take down Wesker on their own, let's see how they would fare against each other. So, without wasting any more time, let's jump right into it by comparing these two physically. By the end of Resident Evil 6, Jake Muller was a 20-year-old human male standing 6'3", and just like his father Albert Wesker, was in incredibly good shape and was built for combat, having spent most of his life as an active mercenary. Like his father, Albert Wesker, Jake injected himself with a sample of a new virus. But this time, Jake injected himself with the C virus, but thanks to the antibodies within his body, it allowed him to gain a number of the physical traits of the virus without causing any forms of serious mutations. Jake was given superhuman levels of strength along with enhanced durability, stamina, and reflexes. The virus may have also affected the rate in which Jake could think and operate on the battlefield, allowing him to think on his feet and recognize certain weaknesses in his opponents. Although he was not granted an advanced healing factor like his father, or Sherry Birkin for that matter, he was able to survive many battle scenarios easier than the average human could. But if he took too much damage at one time, Jake would be killed without question. By the time of his death in 2004, Jack Krauser was a 28-year-old human male standing exactly 6 feet tall and was built like a linebacker and was very muscular. Prior to his allegiance to Albert Wesker, Krauser's early military training kept him in extremely good shape for combat. He possessed a great amount of stamina and endurance and was very tolerant to pain. He was very muscular with a solid upper build, and when he infected himself with the Las Plagas sample given to him by Lord Sattler, all of his physical properties were greatly enhanced. Krauser was granted superhuman strength and speed and reflexes, and his enhanced speed and reflexes were so heightened that he was capable of dodging bullets and rockets like they were nothing. He could also jump exceptionally long distances, and his physical durability was beyond so much of even superhuman capable opponents. This guy could take so much damage that he could take a magnum to the face and keep going as if not affected at all. The Las Plagas injected into his body also granted Krauser the ability to physically mutate his left arm, granting him a gigantic blade arm that was not only capable of being used for cleaving opponents into pieces, but could also be used as a metallic shield which could protect him from all projectiles from the knees up like a riot shield. He could also use this blade to execute a powerful forward charging thrust that could literally rip people apart to the point where their bodies would look like they were exploding. In all, Krauser is one opponent you do not run into unprepared. To be honest, I don't see either combatant having any sort of edge in this department. Both are incredibly young and are extremely well built for combat and have a long history of combative experience as mercenaries. Both have had enhanced physical properties added to themselves in the realms of strength, speed, reflexes, stamina, and durability. The only real difference I see are the terms in which Jake and Jack received their enhanced abilities and whether or not that would provide any sort of advantage to one or the other. With the genetics being passed down to him from Wesker, Jake's body allowed him to take the positive aspects of the C virus without carrying any of the negative physical mutations that the virus would normally apply to most individuals who injected themselves with the C virus, while Krauser was granted the Las Plagas sample, which simply enhanced his already well-built body, but also granted Krauser an extra physical mutation that he could control at will with his left arm. But despite having this extra mutation at his disposal, I don't really see it playing a major factor in this contest in a physical sense, and there is no question that Jake would be able to contend with it much like Leon did. So because these two are so evenly matched, despite having significant differences in their background surrounding on exactly how they receive their enhanced physical traits, no edge will be granted for physical capabilities. Unlike my last matchup with Jake, in which I limited his arsenal of weapons in order to even the matchup that he had against his father Wesker, this time around he will be going all out with his collection of weapons, and although he technically doesn't carry any close range weapons like a knife for close quarters combat, but instead prefers to use his fist, he is still packing a serious amount of firepower. His first weapon is his 909, which is a rather typical handgun with an average amount of firepower and carries a magazine of 15 rounds. He also carries a standard sniper rifle for long-range targets along with a standard shotgun for medium to close-range targets. His Elephant Killer is an extremely powerful magnum revolver that carries a maximum of 5 rounds in its chambers, with his final weapon being the Bear Commander, which is an assault rifle that can fire a high rate of 5.56mm NATO rounds, along with having an alternative firing mode that can be used for the grenade launcher to fire off a 44mm explosive rounds. With an arsenal like this, Jake is just about prepared to take on any target at any ranges. For this matchup, Krauser will be bringing 4 weapons into this contest. His primary long-range weapon was his own personally customized compound bow with an effective killing range of about 60 yards and was fitted to fire both standard arrows along with arrows that had a small explosive charge, in which he would carry up to 30 arrows that could either be switched with either one of these modes. For his medium-range weapon, he carried a standard TMP, which was a fully automatic submachine gun, which had a firing speed of 0.10 seconds and carried a magazine of 30 rounds, and which Krauser always made sure to carry at least 3 extra clips in reserve. His primary weapon for close-range engagements was his personally designed hunter's knife, which measured from about 18 inches from the tip of the blade to the handle, with the blade itself measuring at about 12 inches of sharpened steel. Krauser also carried at least 4 flash grenades, which he would only mostly use to cover his retreat at close ranges. This department is pretty easy to call. There is no question that in terms of weapons, Jake undoubtedly has the advantage, as he is bringing a much higher variety of weapons to this contest that would give him the advantage in both range and firepower. However, despite having this advantage, Krauser is not completely outclassed. Having the bow at his disposal would require Krauser to be far more accurate with his shots to make sure they count, and having the combination of his knife and flash grenades would allow him the advantage if the fight ever got to close ranges. But as long as Jake keeps his distance and maintains a high storage of ammunition, he should be okay. So with that said, I give Jake the edge in weapons. Jake Muller grew up as a mercenary and spent year after year from the age of 12 using his skills on the battlefield with armed and unarmed combat that was taught to him. Although Jake was a capable marksman, just like his father, he chose to specialize in hand-to-hand combat. Jake evidently was so skilled in hand-to-hand combat that he was able to string together powerful attacks quickly even amongst multiple targets. Strangely, a number of Jake's favorite attacks were an upward palm thrust and a downward piercing kick. His physical strikes were so powerful that they seemed to decimate enemies quickly and even stagger the Ustanak. His swiftness in hand-to-hand fighting was shown to be greater and stronger than Chris and Leon's. Jake often incorporated flash, jump kicks, and classic rushing throws without getting worn out due to his incredible stamina. As a battle tactician, he was very much balanced and was able to operate in any combat scenario. As a mercenary, Jake was taught that a good defense is an overwhelming offense. However, if he happened to run into an opponent who could bring even more offense against him, he was never afraid to retreat and fight another day. Jake was also very skilled at switching from shooting an enemy to close quarters combat on a dime and was comfortable with engaging almost any opponent with either of these methods. But if the option was open, he was more than willing to rely solely on his hand-to-hand combat skills in order to give himself a challenge. So in short, Jake's skills were nothing out of the ordinary for most protagonists in the Resident Evil franchise, but what Jake had above all of them was that he was suited to engage opponents up close rather than wanting to keep their distance as most other characters would prefer. As a martial combatant, Krauser was shown to have true combative talent as a soldier, which allowed him to progress through his years of constant training and constant missions as a mercenary with incredible results over just a few years. His extensive training and on-the-field experience allowed Krauser to be very flexible with a wide variety of skills with firearms and heavy ordnance. Krauser was also an exceptional archer, preferring to use his own personalized customized bow as his main weapon. Unlike Leon S. Kennedy, however, who mainly relied on quick thinking and acrobatic maneuvers, Krauser's style of up-close combat was more based off of him taking advantage of his overwhelming strength and using sheer brute force to take down his opponents as quickly as possible. Or if he was given the opportunity, he could easily rely on stealth tactics to catch his opponents off guard. Thanks to his training with Solcom, though Krauser could be seen as a simple brute, he was actually quite clever and capable of applying some pretty brilliant tactics in his approach, and was even capable of foreplanning that relied on stealth maneuvers, surprise attacks, and non-direct approaches to wear down his opponents. Then once he had successfully worn down his opponents, he would then pounce on them with overwhelming force. Though, like so many other antagonists in the Resident Evil franchise, Krauser could get overconfident, and this could result in some sloppy execution of his maneuvers. And Krauser did have a tendency to repeat his attacks, which would make him rather predictable at times and leave him open to retaliation. What we have here is two of the very best physical combatants within the Resident Evil franchise that are not only bringing a lot of combat experience, but are bringing two very different approaches to this form of engagement, and what will ultimately decide not only the outcome of this department, but the final verdict for this matchup is who would be placed in the better position to take advantage of their overall combative capabilities in a majority of the possible combat scenarios. Krauser, in my opinion, is the far better combative planner. Everything that we have seen from him suggests that he is the type of combatant who will choose the location of his choice, plan out ambushes and sneak attacks if possible, and take every attempt to wear down his opponents until he connects with a decisive killing blow. However, this approach to combat can be compromised if an unknown factor suddenly enters the equation, or if the opponent in question can stay on their toes and adapt very quickly to whatever Krauser throws at them, with examples being Krauser not expecting Ada Wong to show up when she did to save Leon S. Kennedy at the last moment from his killing blow, and then afterwards, once Leon knew that Krauser was involved, he was much better prepared and capable of reacting very quickly to Krauser's ambush tactics. Jake is the complete opposite, as he is never shown to go into any engagement with any sort of plan, but rather simply go into whatever situation he finds himself in on the fly. And though this is an excellent combative mentality for on-the-spot action, this can leave Jake seriously vulnerable to combatants who have thought ahead and can force Jake into making serious combative mistakes for which one can take advantage of, which was exactly the case for how Wesker received his victory against Jake in one of my older matchups, as Wesker, being the master manipulator that he is, would use taunts and insults to get under Jake's skin until he made a serious mistake. Because of the weaknesses that Jake and Krauser have, that means that in specific circumstances there is a legitimate chance for each combatant to win this fight. What is ultimately the key factor that decides the outcome of this matchup is their tactical approaches, and unfortunately for Jake, he would be openly choosing the kind of fight that Krauser is best at. Jake, with his superior arsenal, would win the fight at long to medium ranges, while Krauser, with his specific arsenal and combat abilities, would win the fight at close range. But just like his father Wesker, Jake also has a pretty big ego, and would openly choose the close range fight when it would be in his best interest to keep his distance. I would like to stress again that this outcome is very circumstantial. Place Jake in Leon's position in Resident Evil 4 during the final engagement with Krauser, give him a knife, and as long as Jake could slash at Krauser with his knife, if he ever got too close, and make sure to fire at him from a good distance, then there is no question in my mind that Jake would win. Place Krauser in the Ustanax position in the final battle of Resident Evil 6, in which both combatants would be trapped on a platform where Jake would have none of his weapons available, and Krauser would undoubtedly win. Jake is like that old school action hero stereotype. You know what I'm talking about. You know those moments in movies where the hero has the bad guy at gunpoint and he can easily finish the guy off if he just shoots him, but he instead decides to drop the gun to make the fight fair? Jake would do that. The fight between Jake Muller and Jack Krauser would really play out almost exactly like Leon's final battle against Krauser, except with a different outcome. Krauser will have selected the location as he always prefers and would start off the fight charging at Jake. Not expecting this, Jake would take a couple of serious blows from Krauser up close, but would manage to get some shots in it and force Krauser back. From then on, Krauser would continue to lead Jake through the ruins and would attempt multiple sneak attacks, ambushes, and would even use his weapons and leave multiple traps in order to wear Jake down. And with Jake being fully aware, he would use his shotgun should Krauser try to attack up close, and his sniper rifle anytime Krauser attempts to use his bow at long ranges. And although Krauser would be successful a few of these times, causing some damage to Jake, Jake would be able to push through all of Krauser's attempts until he made it to the final area. At this point, Krauser is standing on the upper ledge as he throws his TMP away just like he did before, and begins to mutate his arm. Okay, now this is the part that I'm sure many of you are gonna call bullshit on me, but after seeing Krauser throw away his weapon, Jake would decide to put all of his weapons down and take Krauser on at hand-to-hand combat. The two would battle each other, and despite Krauser his mutated arm out, Jake is holding his own pretty well, and has even managed to get some good hits on Krauser. But Jake is not getting away easy, and he is taking some hits of his own with a combination of Krauser's blade arm and his hunter's knife. At some point, both combatants would pause, having done a solid amount of damage to each other, and that's when Krauser comes up with a brilliant idea. Jake is focused too heavily on Krauser's arm, and it is at that moment that Krauser throws a flash grenade. And since Jake wasn't expecting this, the flash grenade goes off, and now Jake is not only disorientated, he is left completely exposed, and Krauser would finish Jake off with a powerful impalement with his blade arm. And thus, I declare Jack Krauser, the fallen soldier, the winner. Now, I already know some, if not most of you cannot buy this outcome, so please let me try a final attempt to convince you. Jake absolutely inherited his father's ego and his favoritism for up-close combat, so just like his father Wesker, if he would prefer to fight Krauser at close range, then Jake would do the same thing too. The reason why Wesker would beat Krauser and Jake would not be able to pull this off is because Jake did not inherit Wesker's hardened body and his accelerated healing factor, and on top of that, Wesker is a lot smarter of a tactician than Jake, and this makes all the difference. As stated in my Wesker vs. Krauser matchup, I absolutely believe that at first, Krauser would be able to easily outfight Wesker and get a lot of early hits in. But with Wesker's hardened body and accelerated healing factor, it would allow him to not only take the extra damage, but it would buy him the time he needs to adapt to completely outmatch Krauser's offense. Just like Leon, all Jake has to do is keep his distance and rely on his superior firepower. Hell, he would be bringing far more firepower than Leon did, but Leon also had the option of a close-range weapon with the use of his knife, and anyone who has played Resident Evil 4, even on the hardest difficulty, would know that the knife is the most effective weapon to use to take down Krauser once he gets too close, but Jake would not have this option. Now, I'm sure some of you would like to make the statement that if Jake Muller could take down something like the Usnek in a close quarters fight, then he should be able to easily take down Krauser, right? And I would respond to you by saying that that victory against the Usnek was very, very circumstantial and required Jake to have to use the environment itself. All Jake did is punch the Usnek hard enough off the platform into some lava or some molten steel. Remove that element out, and all he would have done is simply knock the Usnek onto some solid ground, which would have allowed him and Sherry to escape, and then the Usnek probably would have tracked them down, probably cornered them, and most likely would have killed them now that Jake doesn't have most of his weapons anymore. So you have to take that factor into effect, and since this area is of Krauser's choice, obviously he's going to have the environmental advantage and select a place where he won't be at those kind of disadvantages. But this is all just my opinion. Do you agree that Jake's ego would get the best of him just like it did in his matchup against his father Wesker? Or do you believe that Jake's advantage in weapons and range would allow him to take down Krauser? Share your thoughts and opinions with me and everyone else in the comments down below, and please remember to be respectful. I do these matchups just for fun. If you liked this video, don't forget to subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and friend me on Facebook with the links in the description down below to keep track of me and my future videos. And like always, thank you guys for watching, you're awesome, and here's a quick preview of my next First Series matchup.